Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I see that some people are joining. Let's just wait a few seconds for others to joining. Maybe running late from other meetings, but we're gonna get started just in a few seconds. All right, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to be welcoming people as they join the session. So hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for CHRI's virtual program, Mastering Your Love Life While Mastering Your Livelihood. My name is Monica Meneses, and I am a member of the CHRS Professional Development Committee. Please be aware that all participant lines are going to be muted during the session to provide for the best sound quality. If you have any questions or any technical difficulties during the session, please use the Q&A feature as it will be monitored throughout the session, and the Q&A feature can be found at the bottom of your screen. If you have any technical difficulties, please email info@chra.com. Also, if you cannot hear the audio through your computer speakers, you can call in using the calling number and meeting ID that was sent to you with your Zoom registration confirmation. Today's virtual program is going to be recorded and is going to be available for download on our website shortly. We will share details with all of the attendees and membership once it is available. Questions about the presentation content can also be entered in the Q&A feature. If you have any experiences that you would like to share as the speakers are sharing the presentation, or comments that you would like to share with other attendees, please go ahead and submit them through the Q&A feature. I'm going to be monitoring your questions and comments to facilitate a conversation towards the end of the presentation so that Rod and Lynn have an opportunity to address your questions, any comments and experiences that you would like to share. Also, if you are a SHRM or HRCI certified, this virtual program is worth 1 hour of general HR credit by HRCI and 1 SHRM PDC towards your recertification. An email is going to be sent to you with the recertification IDs later today or tomorrow. So for today's virtual education program, our speakers are Rod Hurston and Lynn Argenbright. So Ron Hurston is the former life coach for the Baltimore Ravens, author and certified coach with a master's degree in counseling. In his 30 years of working with influential high performers, Rod has observed that the #1 detraction to productivity and the greater source of stress, it's not the demands of the workplace, but most often is a relationship problem outside of work. In his thriving practice, he coaches professional athletes, top business professionals, and community leaders to break through emotional and attachment barriers that hold them back from being the leaders that they meant to be. And we also have Lynn Argenbright, and she has been an employee benefits advisor for the last 17 years. While she was busy building a successful career, she found that her greatest desire to have a thriving marriage was challenged the most. The time and energy spent on restoring her relationship was an emotional and financial strain that negatively impacted her work performance and well-being. Working with Rod as a marriage mentor has helped her and her husband see that a dream marriage really is possible with the right tools. As Len works with employers to offer an employee benefits program that delivers value, she focuses on bringing cura personalis, or care for the whole person in the workplace. Now, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Rod and Len.
Thank you so much, Monica. It's really great to be with everybody this afternoon and share this opportunity with Rod. I feel like we have so much to be thankful for, actually, in terms of how we met each other, Rod, at actually my employer. All those years ago, you came in and you spoke actually to some of our clients. and to our employees. And just last year was, I think, really when we developed our friendship, and is really around this topic that resonated so much for me. And just from that standpoint, just this idea of what we are all facing in the workforce. And I'm so excited to be here with you, Rod, here today.
Well, I'm absolutely honored to be here. Lynn, you already know this. I have the utmost respect for you and the work that you do. And I'm grateful that we're able to connect around this very important topic. Lynn is an absolute guru when it comes to thinking about the needs that people have in the workplace. And I just appreciate your passion and your care, your compassion for people in the space that you operate in. I'll just share a little bit about me very quickly. I've spent since 1999, I guess it's now been 24 years. I didn't know it was that long, working with professional athletes as it relates to their life goals, dreams. We found ourselves focusing a lot on relationships because that became sort of the prime area of concern. So with athletes, coaches, front office personnel with the Baltimore Ravens, I was privileged to win 2 Super Bowls with them. So shout out to the Ravens. But yeah, this area of relationships has been really significant. And so, yeah, I mean, that's where I've been married 32 years, right? I've been working on this area, been trying to encourage people in this area. And we just, we're passionate. Lynn and I share this passion for relationships and for relationship / emotional health. So I'm delighted to be here. And yeah, I don't know what else I could say.
All right. Well, and as we get started, I think we can jump in. Monica, is that okay? Okay.
Outstanding. So I think it's worth asking the question, why are we discussing personal relationships at work? Because for most of our history, this has been sort of a taboo subject, like don't bring your personal relationship life to work, leave that separately. But what we found over the years, and I knew this anecdotally, I began to do some research and found that this is actually one of the key areas that employers wish that their employers would work on. Because some people are thriving in their relationships, but it's also true that some people are in deep despair over relationships. And I think that the pandemic has sort of exacerbated this notion, but a lot of people are in despair over relationships, and then they have to show up to work. Just put that together. What we found is that it's true, relationship challenges do not stay at home. It's not like you can just have an argument with your significant other, right? Have a heated conversation the night before and just go off to work and pack everything away, separate these two issues and get on with your day. It just doesn't happen like that. We bring these things to work. And I was just talking with a client, in fact, who spent, I think 12 years in the NFL, just got off the line with him. He was talking about this very thing, as he has to show up, even as a retired player, to community events when he and his wife are not connecting, when they've had arguments, he still has to show up. He says, and it's just not the same. As I mentioned before, I found it to be the #1 distraction for people in the workplace, right? It's not the workload, it is the distraction of relationship challenges that seems to be the #1 greatest source of stress in their lives, not the demands of work. And most often it's a relationship problem, that they've been oftentimes in long-term relationships, right? And they just keep sort of circulating, right? Coming back to very common sorts of issues. And we'll talk about that some as well. Probably the biggest concern, if you are in HR, as many of you are, is the impact that this has on the work, on work productivity, right? And what we're finding is that this anxiety, this relationship anxiety, reduces productivity and performance. One study I read called the Innovation Study said that from $350 to $400 billion in corporate profits are lost annually. And I've read articles from all across Europe, as well as here in the US, and we're seeing this sort of really become verified, right? That it is an extraordinary price tag.
Rod,
Yes.
Just to chime in there, as we've talked about, I think, part of the reason why I'm here today with you is because of just this. My role within my organization is very much that top line growth of a company, but you don't have to necessarily be in that role, right, for the productivity. And what you're saying personally is really how this resonated with me, because having gone through this myself after being, married, at that time, 18 years, when I was going through some very significant challenges in my marriage, I was totally unproductive. And actually, as people were learning that I was going to be talking with you to CHRA today, they said, I had no idea, Lynn, that you were going through anything. And I think that's what, as HR people, have the opportunity to kind of make this topic really more centered and not as taboo, because we all know that, we're human, right? We all go through so many different emotions. And I was going through many, different counseling sessions. I would call it his, mine, and ours, right? And spending lots of energy there and taking time out of work. But nobody knew, right? Nobody knew that I was going through that.
And no one knew the levels of stress you were probably also carrying as you did show up to meetings and to things, just pressing your way into those things. I really appreciate you sharing that part of your story, Lynn. As you and I talk, we have suspected that people can resonate with this. This makes sense for HR leaders as well as for employees in the workplace. So we put together a survey. How about we share our survey with them? We'd like to get you involved. Share with us through the survey what might resonate with you. There's a QR code. You can use that code, or there'll be one on this next slide that you can grab. Hope everyone can see that, can access that.
Yeah.
Right.
So
the first question simply says, how much stress is created in your life by these areas? We'll give people
probably give it a couple seconds. Looks like we have about 5 people here have tried. Okay.
Nice. People said the stress. Oh, wow. I love this. Is helpful. Outstanding. So they say the livelihood is a huge factor, right? So now we come back down to 6.8. Interesting. So let's let this continue to flow for a moment.
9, 8 people.
What we come down to. Thank you all for participating. Thank you for the insight.
Yeah, this is very helpful.
Interesting. Very interesting. So at this point, what the numbers suggest is that the stress levels are not very different between what you experience at work and what you experience at home. And my initial impression is that you're probably carrying relationship stress to work and or carrying work stress home, right? And so you're in two spaces having very stressful engagements, very stressful days. Wow, outstanding. Thank you all for sharing your insights here. Thank you. Let's take a look at our next question. Should pop up. All right. So that question is, go ahead, Lynn.
What part of your work life gets most challenged by your experience with relationship stress? So there's a few options here. The ability to focus in meetings, tasks. Oh, it's already jumping around on me here. Ability to be fully present at work. Communication with team members. And the ability to deliver projects on time.
Outstanding. So, wow, look at, wow, y'all are,
They're busy.
they're busy. They're busy.
They're paying attention. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your participation. This is really helpful. So the first most challenging space is the ability to be fully present at work, right? It's sort of what I've suggested anecdotally, right? As in all of my work with people, with the Ravens and in other professional spaces, right? It's hard to show up and be completely there. The ability to focus in meetings and tasks. I mean, you know what it's like to be sitting in a meeting, Lynn, and your mind is just, all of a sudden you lose your sense of presence, right? You were there, you were trying to be there, and all of a sudden you just can't focus. Interesting, in the sports world, we're seeing people decide like, no, I just can't do this. I can't show up and pretend that I'm all here because it's dangerous. The ability to deliver projects on time, right? And oftentimes people are sort of graded in the employment space as, just unable to deliver on time, when in fact it could be that they're juggling some real emotional relationship struggles. And then the fourth one is the ability to communicate with team members. So somehow people are finding a way, it seems, to continue to communicate, but that ability to be present is very, very significant from what we're seeing here. Let's check into one other question that we have for you in our survey here. Here we go.
So what are some ways you've tried to address these stressors? Really, you can kind of rank these. You don't have to, you can pick as many as you like. We probably didn't get them all on here as in terms of options. And I'm sure we all have some creative ways to deal with stress. We could have put the one where you put your head in the sand too and ignore it, but I guess that's still technically a way you're dealing with it, right? So, yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. All of these are very reasonable ways, right, of trying to handle these stress factors in our lives. The number one way that we have on this survey, people say, I take a mental health day off. Kudos to you. Like, shout out to you. That's really forward thinking on your part. Take a mental health day. We used to have our kids when they were all in private schools. We would say, hey, if you can't do it today, just let us know. You can take a mental health day. Talking to a therapist, mentor, or coach. I'm proud of people now seeing the need to access these resources. I think what this survey suggests to us, Lynn, is that people are dealing with these relationship stressors, and that they're reaching out to resources, and might be even more reason for employers to get behind this.
Yeah, and I just want to point out there at the very bottom, for those that maybe have answered that they haven't tried anything yet, maybe in their mind, or even if you do feel like giving up, as an individual, I think hopefully by the end of this we'll be talking through some ways that, at least from my standpoint, is having, not losing hope in that relationship, and how can we encourage our employees that maybe they want to access things in a different way, or maybe they feel like they've tried so many things, but there's also, we never want to give up, right, Rod?
Absolutely. Do not give up. Whatever you do, don't give up. Don't give up. And I'm glad not too many people are spending most of their time at happy hours, because it doesn't make stress go away.
Yeah.
Except for a little while. All right. Hey,
All right.
let's jump into some benefits, Lynn. I'd love if you could share some of the benefits of employees helping improve relationships.
You bet. And hopefully everyone's following along with your the handout that CHRA provided to you. But there are so many benefits for helping employees with their relationship skills. We know from the research that companies that have relationship happy employees, they actually are happier at work. I know that it kind of sounds like the exact same thing, but the relationships, our emotions drive so much of the way that we show up. And in the workplace, we have we know the person down the hall that's laughing, or they are always they're there to cheer somebody up, that leads to just an overall feeling within your colleagues of just more happiness, and also leading to more sales and profitability. People who are happy, your customers, that comes forward when your employees are engaging with them. I think that we know that intuitively, but as you're building, this business case of how, why would we want to even think about, improving relationships, there are significant benefits from the company side. And really, as we think through how to support employees with what they need and what they're going through, employees who are supported by their employers, there are so many ways that your benefits plans can be helpful to your employees, such as EAPs and other things. But when employees have those resources and they're actually engaging with them at the time when they need them, they really, that relationship turmoil that they're going through, they become much more loyal because you've given them a way to cope and to deal with that situation. And then as we have worked with many of our clients, we are shifting, I think, today more than ever as we've come out of the pandemic, that employees, as we think about our workforce, and we're, prior to the pandemic, maybe we thought of them just as workers, right? That they're just there to get the job done. But really, this idea that we're all humans, we are bringing ourselves to work. This is beginning to resonate within a lot of our clients. And as you think about well-being, just that they are able to bring their situation to work, and in a way that they aren't going to be dinged for that. We know that the cost of employee turnover is just huge. And so recognizing when employees are going through these challenges and helping them get through it, and then they get back on track, can be so meaningful to that retention strategy. So we know that better relationships and emotional intelligence can really bring that healthy interaction as well to each other, your colleagues, and it just kind of translates through an organization when people have good relationship skills.
Yeah, there's no doubt about what you just shared there, Lynn, and I really appreciate you hitting on some really key factors. I can't help but wonder how much of the Great Resignation has brought awareness to this point that people are much more than what they produce, right? But that they are people who need to be well and healthy in order to produce. Because I think people do want to produce when they come to work, but this issue is something that it just can't. It's not a factor. That's the point. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Hey, let's get into a framework for relationship success. And as I share these things, I'm really only giving you sort of half of the framework just because our time won't allow. There's 6 core areas, but I want to touch on 3 of them. I think it's important for you who are part of this webinar, if you will think in terms of your own personal experiences, as you have in the survey, but also if you'll think in terms of the employees whose lives you get to support and encourage. And so you may see something in here that resonates for you personally. You may see something in here that makes you say, this is what I might need to think about the next time I have a situation at work. I want to give you, we're going to work on 3 key areas. First of all, I want to talk about how important it is to learn to resolve long-standing conflicts. Long-standing is the key word. It is the operative word here. Conflicts are what keep people disconnected from one another, because no one wants to go closer to the source of pain. Just like people leave the scene of the crime, people drift away from the place of pain. And if there's painful conflict, people do not connect. They don't connect in the workspace with people who they feel like is a source of pain. Neither do they connect with their spouses or significant others. So what happens when these conflicts are going on is we tend to stack, right? I've just sort of described this phenomenon as layering conflict upon conflict upon conflict. So the longer these conflicts go unresolved, the more we stack. And the more we stack, the farther apart we grow. The farther apart we grow, Lynn, is the more distress we are in. So it's not just that, the conflict is going to go away and it's no longer an issue, but our distress levels grow, which means our anxiety is growing because we keep stacking, which makes people uber sensitive, what we would call triggered by anything that reminds them of the pain they experienced in the conflict, whether that is experienced with their significant other or it is experienced with someone in the workplace. So I have one of my coaches who's a dear friend. She had the story with me that he was interacting with a person at work, and the person he couldn't get close to this guy. He didn't want to be around him. He didn't like him. There was no reason at all, really. And so one of his leaders asked him, he said, "I noticed you don't spend any time with this person. What's going on there?" And he had to give it some thought, and it hit him. Oh, this person reminds me of my father, who I had significant conflicts and pain with. And so he couldn't get close to that person. He couldn't really work with that person because of these unresolved conflicts he had with a relationship with his dad. So stacking is a key issue. Let's talk about cycles as it relates to conflicts, because we all have cycles in our conflicts. And it sounds something like this. Oh, here we go again. Here we go again, right? We're doing that again. When people go through the cycles of conflict repeatedly, I was meeting with a client couple recently, and they've been married for 17 years now. They have 4 kids. They both, he had a great career in football. She had a great career of her own. And they said, we just can't seem to get out of these horrible cycles. Nothing ever seems to get resolved. What happens with cycles is, again, the moment something is triggered, the moment something is said or done, the rolling of the eyes, a facial expression, right away, the cycle begins all over. These cycles are what add to the stacking. There's a third component to this, this issue of long-standing conflicts, which is what we call styles, where I want to help people, if you can help people understand, because this applies in the workplace as well, right? These styles of how we act within our cycles. And there are 3 basic terms. Well, 2 basic terms I think would be helpful. We either withdraw or we pursue. So there's either the withdraw in the relationship, or there is the withdraw, pursue, or there is the pursue. So let me talk to you about these a little bit. Wherever you see people who pursue in their relationships, again, think at home, think at work, this is fireworks. This is hot, heavy, it's going to collide, it's going to blow up, and then eventually both people just sort of grow distant. Where there is pursue withdrawal, you have one person who becomes uber frustrated because the withdrawer won't engage to resolve the conflict. I actually just got off the phone with a client who said, my spouse belittles me and berates me and says all kinds of nasty things to me. And when they do that, I just begin to pull away more and more and more and more. What that spouse who's pursuing really wants is engagement and understanding of where they are emotionally. We'll talk about that in a moment. But if we can help couples understand these cycles, then they can at least be equipped to know, oh, when this cycle happens and I'm acting out of my style, this is how the conflict continues. And so we help them to begin to resolve conflict by learning how to stay engaged and how to listen to one another. We'll get to some listening and communicating in just a moment. I hope this is making sense, but if we can help people learn to resolve long-standing conflicts, think about how much more productive even the workspace can be. So another key area that we focus on is helping people learn how to connect emotionally. There's a lot of rational thinking, because there's a lot of smart people in corporate America, right? We're smart, we're rational, we're logical, but we're discovering based on the science of emotional intelligence that this is actually as brilliant, if not more brilliant, than our logical minds. And so we try to help people begin to connect emotionally if they can understand what I call your big three. Let me talk to you about these very quickly. All of us have a dominant childhood feeling. When we're growing up in our parents' homes, there's a way that you felt. You can ask yourself this question, or you can make the statement, when I was growing up in my parents' home, I always felt blank. Some people might say I felt unheard, I felt invisible, I felt nervous or afraid. And just think about that for you. What did you feel growing up in your family of origin, right, in your parents' home in particular? With that dominant feeling comes a dominant adult fear. And that dominant fear is, if this ever happens to me, I don't know what I would do. Or this is a thing that I have to avoid at all costs. And so for some people, it's the fear of being alone. For some people, it is the fear of being ignored. For some people, it's the fear of, will I ever be loved? And so we find ourselves acting out of our childhood feeling. It becomes an adult fear, which then becomes a dominant emotional need in our adult life. So for example, if you feared failure as a child because the dominant feeling was fear, well, when you become an adult and when you're in the workplace or in a very close relationship, right, you have a dominant emotional need to be accepted and affirmed, right? So that you're afraid, if I'm not accepted, if I'm not affirmed, then somehow I must be a failure. And it impacts how we show up to work. Because if I leave home feeling like a failure, it's hard for me to get excited about what I'm doing at work. Or I go headlong into my work, become a workaholic, because I can't bear to be a failure at work like I feel like I am one at home. I hope this is making sense. Lynn?
Yeah, Rod, this area right here, actually, as we were being coached by you, was probably the hardest area, and also the area that light bulb kind of came on in a huge way. And I think when in our case, my husband and I went through this learning, and I know we're only getting into it a little bit here today, we were actually in a pretty good space. And that's one of the things I want to, just make sure that people understand that this doesn't have to be if you're in a crisis mode. If you're in a good spot right now, the chances are these three areas, your dominant childhood feeling, adult fear, and emotional need, we don't really even recognize what that is. And how it showed up for me personally was I grew up in a home that my father was in the military, and we lived paycheck to paycheck. So we often, I heard we'll have to wait till next payday, for something to show up or to get something. Well, this one particular time, as I was really trying to think back, like, how did I feel as a child? It occurred to me that this time when we didn't have any milk in the refrigerator, and my mom said, we're going to have to wait till payday. That feeling of insecurity of not having milk, and recognize if I was, 6 or 7, of course I had food and whatnot, but just that kind of taking that in led to me understanding that my adult fear, as I have, grown up, is that I don't want to be dependent on anybody, because I never want to not have milk right in my refrigerator. And to this day, if my milk runs low, that's like a trigger. And I never actually understood where that really kind of came from. But how that showed up for me as a need in terms of my marriage, which was really this conflict between, I don't want to be dependent on anybody, right? And what that translated to was I was looking for security as a need, right? As many people might have. And that meant for me that I was full blown into providing for our family, right? Helping to make sure that we always had milk. I have plenty of milk today, right? I could buy plenty of milk today. But the flip side of that was, I learned that in my husband's case, he grew up as a latchkey kid, and he actually didn't, he was felt ignored as a kid. It wasn't on purpose, I'm sure, his parents were doing the best that they could, but that was still the feeling that he brought into as an adult, that he would be ignored and be, not seen, right? So here he was, as an adult, and we're in this marriage, I'm working and working, right? And his emotional need was like, don't ignore me. I want quality time with you, and I want to be with you. And as I'm saying, well, I've, need to do this so that, in my head, not realizing we need to, pay the bills, etc. But it wasn't that he just needed me because he's, out of anything like that. Wasn't trying to say it was people want to spend time, hopefully, as a couple, right? But this was actually a real need that came out of his childhood, that then I was like, oh, okay, so you're not just telling me you don't want me to work, or you want me to, shut off things, but I need your time and attention. And that was really big for him, because then it was easier then for us to talk with each other and say, hey, I'm not ignoring you. I need to do this. I recognize where his fear was coming from. And we've just been in such a different space, because now I understand that it's not just, it's a real something inside of him and me, that now I'm also recognizing that I don't need to, maybe I don't need to return that email, right? Or do this or that. So I hope that is, helpful to kind of bring out these a little bit more. But it was probably the biggest change that we've had.
Lynn, that's huge. I really appreciate you said that it wasn't him asking you not to go to work. It was him saying, really, I just need some time with you, because he was dealing with his own internal fear. And when you heard it as don't go to work, that created quite a conflict internally for you, didn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Meant going to work was stressful. Yeah, yeah. That's funny because you and I have very similar stories. I grew up, my mother was the breadwinner and my father was not in the picture. And I watched my mom struggle to make ends meet. Well, I developed the same sense of independence, and how it translated in my marriage was workaholism. And my workaholism made my wife feel abandoned, which was a huge feeling and fear for her growing up because she was abandoned. So when I would spend crazy hours working, trying to perfect my craft and not be dependent on anyone, she was feeling abandoned. And so I always had this dilemma about how long was I going to be at work, and is she going to call me? And so, what you're sharing absolutely resonates, which leads me to our communication, which is really important because so often when we talk about communication in relationships and even in the workplace, we're talking about just words, right? Did I say the right thing, right? And we'll ask questions like, well, did you understand me? But really what has to happen is that we need to learn how to do what I call keeping it real, right? I use this acronym, REAL, and I suggest to couples that there are 4 things that they really should focus on. One is reaching for the other, because when there's emotional disconnect, the tendency is either to blame or to distance. But if we can choose to move forward toward one another, right, not in a hostile fashion, but in a way that says, I'm going to stay, I'm not going to just drop out of the conversation, I'm going to try to hear you, right, I want to reach for the other. In fact, some of my clients I work with, I have a couple, wonderful couple, Super Bowl winners and all these things. I said, do you guys touch much? They said, we hardly ever touch or kiss or hug. And I said, well, how do you have 3 children? I'm still trying to figure that out. Right. But they were going through these amazing cycles of conflict. And when I began to teach them how to start reaching for one another, all of a sudden their anxiety levels and their conflict levels began to rapidly decline. Right. I talk about how important it is to empathize with one another, right? How to simply put yourself in the shoes of the other person, because the other person is having an experience, right? Again, this is very true in the workplace as well, because when you're in a meeting with, with a boss or a manager or someone else, and there's tension, if we can simply ask, what is the other person experiencing right now? Right? It helps us to have some context and be able to communicate, to convey on the basis of trying to see them with eyes of humanity and compassion. Affirmation is huge. You talked about essentially affirming your husband, right? Affirmation is simply saying, hey, your feelings are valid here, right? So often what we do is we say, why would you feel that way? How could you feel that way? That makes no sense. And now all of a sudden the person's, when they feel emotionally belittled, then the distance that we talked about begins to happen again. But if we can affirm them in a conversation and communication, simply saying, oh, how you feel makes sense. That's understandable that you would feel that way. Or I respect how you feel. I really do, right? Is to affirm them. And then I talk about how important it is that we learn to listen. And I like to add, and listen longer, right? And listening is not just about hearing the words, but it's also about watching people's body language. It's watching their facial expression, right? So that we can see where people are. It's what I call listening in a multi-dimensional fashion. Again, we don't have time to get into that, all the details here. But what I want to do in this framework is help our HR leaders understand how important it is that we help people learn to communicate effectively, right? If they learn this and can take it home or can have it at home and can bring it to work, right? All of a sudden, clarity, productivity, profit, performance, all begin to move in the right direction. So I've given you some real keys for a framework. What we want everyone else to do is to begin to think about your new master plan, right? Again, we said at the beginning here, think about how you want to maybe be better relationally, but also think about how you can help someone resolve conflicts, be more connected emotionally, and communicate more effectively. So I've given you 3 action points here today that I would invite you to just take a moment and fill in the blanks for you. Consider this your strategy, your new strategy, something you can take home with you, something you can do right away that will make a difference in your relationships.
Yeah, I know it's probably, as everyone's sort of thinking, I just wanted to say that, you know, the opportunity to kind of understand this for ourselves, and then have the ability to be able to recognize this in others has been really interesting for me, because as I, am in various meetings with even colleagues, and these are really very valuable in so many ways. And you don't have to do them all at the same time. I think, as we learn about all of these, it's one of these might show up more for you than the other, if whether it's the conflict or, even the emotional needs. And some you might not need it at the moment, right?
But you will need them.
Right, absolutely.
Because conflicts are always happening, right? Yeah, conflicts are always happening. So maybe let me give some ideas as people are thinking about these for their strategy. To get better at resolving conflicts, I will choose not to withdraw so quickly, or I will choose not to pursue so hotly, right? So that might be one way to think about it. To strengthen our connection, I'll acknowledge my dominant emotional need for blank. What do I need? What do you really need emotionally? I wonder if you've thought about that. What do you need emotionally? And this is in your relationship life, but it is period. All of us have a dominant, a primary emotional need in our lives, which is based on that dominant feeling and the dominant fear. And then thirdly, to become a healthier communicator in my relationship, I will work on, is it reaching? Is it being more empathic? Is it being more affirming of another person's feelings, emotions? Or is it listening just a little bit longer, right? And so if you can take one principle from each of these things in our framework, you can begin to, as Lynn said, nurture this in your own life, and then you'll be able to perhaps encourage some of this with employees. So as you are working on that, and we hope you'll take this away, at least with the handout, we want to open up the floor for some live coaching or Q&A, where we can hear from you. What are your questions? What are some of the challenges you're facing? These can be personal. They can be as it relates to your work with employees. But let us have an opportunity to walk with you. I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment while we take some questions.
We have 2 comments. I think, Lang, would you like to take them over and then read both of the comments that we received? I think that you're muted, Lynn.
Sorry about that. Thank you. And these are very, very, very nice. One comment says, not a question, but let me tell you, this is a best-in-class webinar. That was really our hope here, that we're bringing some valuable information that will be able to, impact people, really. And then another says, thank you so much. This is a marvelous hour packed with so much. It's counseling and understanding, self-growth mixed with culture in the workplace. I'd love for this to be the new norm at companies. Incredible, incredible, incredible. And here's another question from someone. Can you explain the reach in real, Rod?
Yes, absolutely. So the reach in real has to do with with choosing not to just withdraw from a conversation or from the conflict with the person that you care about. And what we find is that if it's appropriate and you can even just touch each other gently, right? Just a hand on the back, a gentle grasp of the hand, looking the person in the eyes gently, and essentially saying, whether it's with words or not, I'm still here, right? I'm not going to just run away from this. I'm not going to back away and leave you in the struggle of your own dominant emotional need and dominant fear, right? It is choosing to connect rather than disconnect.
I liked when we were learning that too, Rod, that 20-second hug, it really, as human beings, that connection is so important. And it's not just, sometimes the peck on the cheek or whatnot, but just the fact that you're, taking that time and that reaching, even being that a couple minutes a day. It's silly, but I have it on my calendar, usually in the evening, and it's 10 minutes of just, I put everything down and just reach and connect with each other. Not about, it could be about whatever, right? But it's just taking that time in the midst of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that's really important about this is what happens in our brain, right? The pleasure centers in our brain begin to light up when we are gently, warmly, safely touched. And so we begin to feel safer in the relationship. And that's a real key for so many people. It actually has the power of lowering our anxiety levels, right? So that we can be calm. When we lower those anxiety levels, we can now, our executive functioning, our ability to make decisions, our ability to think clearly comes right back online, so that we don't start telling ourselves these imaginative stories like, well, this person hates my guts. We're not going to make it. This is going to be horrible, right? And I don't have to go to work with all of that weight on me. Even if we don't resolve it, at least we have reached for one another.
Monica, do you want to ask a few others here? Looks like we have a couple others.
Sure. All right, let's see. I'll take the question from Lisa. How do we help company cultures understand the importance of understanding these types of concepts and how home carries into work?
Lynn, nope. That's a great question. You want to start on that one? I'll jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's even just from the standpoint of, as these are coming up in the workplace. I mean, I think this is where it really resonated to me, is that some of my colleagues have been married for, over 3 decades. And I'm learning that, they're getting a divorce, for example. I'm hearing of the executive that did something that they shouldn't have. And it totally causes a PR nightmare. We all have heard about those. We see just the fact that divorce in general and in our country and others is so high. This is a problem. And this is something that I really think in a way it's, I don't know, I think it just, you can bring this up in a way that it is kind of the reality, right? And you're really just bringing it to light, even in a topic like this today that we're even talking about it. Rod, you have more to add?
Yeah, the research is bearing this out, right? I think I sent you, Lynn, probably 8 or 10 links of articles that I've been reading over the last several weeks, right, that show that people in the workplace are disengaging. And I'm not sure if it was, I forget who did the recent research. I don't know if it was Harvard Business Review, But what they showed is about 50% of American employees are disengaged, right? And that is because they are stressed and they're struggling. And these relationship issues are a significant factor. So I think you can help employers understand this just by showing that the research is there.
Yeah. We may have time for just this last one, Monica.
Yes, we have one more from Stephanie. How can an employee best communicate a personal relationship issue with their employer?
That's a tough issue. Lynn and I have been talking about this a great deal because there's just not space, and it's so dicey from an employer-employee boundaries perspective. But I think it's still, my understanding is that it's probably helpful just to say, I'm having a personal issue. I have a personal need that I need to address. I think that's probably about as far as it can go. But I think it's important that employers start, as you said earlier, Lynn, start creating space for people to quietly get resources, or even do what PSA has done. Companies in Europe are doing this more and more, but I think we're just starting to get the idea. Bring somebody in like me, right? Shameless plug, but bring somebody in like me who can be a resource that people can access in a way that is perhaps private, or even in a workshop setting. Like, let's just start equipping people with things they need. And people want to be in places of employment that are providing important equipping. Don't try to tweet that.
And I'll just add, Rod, I recently was talking with a client, and they wanted to provide some resources for their employees that were going through divorce. And I was like, okay, yes, we can do that. We can help you, look for that. On the other hand, I'm thinking, just like we think about our, preventive care, right? What could we do to offer our employees other resources that they don't have to get to that state, right? And I will just say, and I know we're coming up to our time here, but that thousands of dollars are spent every year on, trying to resolve and kind of come and back and revive maybe a marriage. And that isn't necessarily always covered by your health plan, right? So employers don't have to worry about that cost per se, but if the individual is going for counseling and whatnot, it is very expensive. And you don't, it shows up though in other ways, maybe in anxiety medications or depression medications, and all of that as well. So there is real costs potentially if they're on your health plan as well there. So I think we've have 2 minutes here. We want to respect everybody's time. Just by way of wrapping up, from the standpoint, hopefully today, that you've taken away some things that you can bring back to your company, to yourself, to your own relationship. And as we've talked through these 3 areas of resolving longstanding conflicts, knowing your big 3 and keeping communication real. I feel like HR people, you all are getting so much of this. You have this information probably more than anybody else, and that takes its toll probably, on you as well. So we hope that this has been valuable. And, I really think that you're in a very unique position to be able to help keep marriages together, or keep those relationships going that impact families, that impact children, and really can just, change people's lives.
Yeah, I think that's really huge, Lynn. It's important to remember relationship health is emotional mental health, right? Because at the root of relationship health is our emotions. We put together some resources. I want to encourage you to reach out to Lynn. Just grab the QR code. She is the benefits gurette. Is that a word? I don't even know. Guru. Yeah, I appreciate so much the work she does. I want to encourage people to reach out to her. I've added some resources. If you want to reach out to me, there's a free Happy Marriage workshop. It's just it's a checklist, and I take you through the 6 Keys. I gave you 3 parts of the framework today. The other 3 are in there. It's recorded. You can have that. It's free. Just sign up for it. And I want to introduce my Dream Marriage Masterclass, which is a great resource for maybe you can use it in the office. You can use it at home with your significant other, your spouse. Just access that course. And just starting a YouTube channel where I can give away content, which I'm enjoying doing, right? Just sharing things like this that people can access. And then finally, I'd love to just book a workshop. I'll come to your workspace and offer some of what we do in the course so that people have an opportunity to work on their relationship life in a workshop setting.
All right, thank you so much, Rod and Lynn, for our great education program. As Keith, David, Lisa sharing the Q&A. Thanks for the best in-class webinar. Thanks for sharing so many tools that we will be able to apply right away, not only personally, but also in the professional setting. We'll be sending a recording of today's session to those who attended today, as well as an email with the recertification credit IDs in a brief survey. This concludes today's presentation, and we look forward to seeing everyone at CHRA's next virtual program that is going to be around everything that you need to know about retirement plans, that it's scheduled for June 8th. Thanks, everyone, and have a great afternoon.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.